Hey guys, it is Jenna, what is up, and welcome back to the Board Game Garden. Today we are going to be doing a Kickstarter preview and overview of this game right here. This is Zoo Tycoon, the board game. It is legitimately Zoo Tycoon, the video game, in a board game, which makes me incredibly happy because I, as a child, used to play Zoo Tycoon and Roller Coaster Tycoon all the time. So when I got the email about this, I was very, very excited to work with the publisher and designer, which, by the way, this is published by Treacer and designed by Mark Durr and Samuel Luterbacher, I think is how you pronounce it. I apologize, Samuel, but this is Zoo Tycoon, the board game. It, like I said, is pretty much the board game version of Zoo Tycoon. I'm very, very excited to show you guys how this game plays. But before we get into that, I do want to mention that this is up on Kickstarter right now on October 25th. If you guys want to go and check it out, I will have the link down below to it in the description box. It plays 2 to 4 players and is ages 12 plus and runs 120 to 180 minutes. So this is a little bit of a longer game. It is a 4 out of 5 on Board Game Geek, so it's a little bit heavier. I believe it's in like the medium heavy range, but I'm very, very excited to show you guys an overview of this. Just note that it is a very simple overview. It doesn't go in depth with too many things, but I did want to show you guys a good overview of how it plays so you guys can kind of get a feel if it would be something that you would be interested in or not. But without further ado, let's head down to the table and see how Zoo Tycoon, the board game, plays. In Zoo Tycoon, the board game, you start as one of the managers of the 4 city parks. The city is aiming for a realignment of these parks in hopes that the addition of animals will enhance these green spaces, making them more attractive to the public. After 8 years and a first evaluation, whoever manages these 8 years most successfully for their own park may more than justifiably expect to be the preferred applicants for this attractive position. Give it your best shot, and let's play Zoo Tycoon, the board game. To give you a little overview, each game is played over 8 rounds, 1 starting round, 6 normal rounds, and an ending round, and each round is divided into 4 seasons that are laid out on the main board. Players will manage their zoo, contribute to conservations, place buildings and enclosures and animals as well as offspring in their zoo, and at the end of the 8 years they will compare their popularity as well as their conservation, and whichever number is lower is their final victory points. Now before we get into an overview of each of the seasons and how each of the rounds are played, let's take a look at the animal cards. The animals in Zoo Tycoon, the board game, are one of the most important things, and throughout the game you are trying to make each species as happy as possible. And the best way to do this is by taking a look at one of the animal cards and going over everything that is laid out on the cards. Now taking a look at this red panda card, the first thing you see in the top left hand corner is the popularity value. This is how much popularity you will get by playing this card. Next up you have the education value as well as the conservation value. Both of these will be added to the coordinating tracks once a focal point, either an education focal point or a conservation focal point, is added to that animal's enclosure, and those focal points will help with scoring buildings throughout the game as well. Next up, you have the National Park Corporation that specific animal belongs to, the number of animals per enclosure tile, the cost per enclosure tile, as well as the social behavior of the male animals, and the tolerance for mixed enclosures. Next up, this number indicates what level on the zoo market board that animal is, and right beside it you have the name of that species. I should also mention that the color is actually representative of the enclosure that that animal would like to be in, whether that is rainforest, savanna, or here with the red panda, that is the mountain forest. Next up, moving into the animal's happiness, this is represented by the yellow, light green, and dark green sections of the card. First up, we have experience. This is how long that animal has been in your park. You then have free space, which is enclosure tiles that are not occupied by another animal in that specific specific species enclosure. There are the amount of retreats that that animal would like in their enclosure. And lastly, this is the number of animals that that species would specifically like in their enclosure. Your goal throughout the game is to make your animals as happy as possible, getting all 4 of these categories into the dark green section. And lastly, you have the offspring section of each card in the bottom right-hand corner. The first part is the litter dice roll. This is basically representing whether you are rolling for each female in the enclosure or for each pair in the enclosure. And you also have the litter size, which is however many offspring cubes that would be added per successful die roll. And that is a quick overview of the animal cards. Every single one is completely unique in the way that you take care of them and make them happy. But now let's move on to how each round is played out with the 4 different seasons. Note that in the first starting round, there is no spring season. So let's get into the summer, and we will loop back around to spring at the end. So the first thing that will happen in summer is that the market will get renewed. There is actually a second layer to the main board where you can actually move it randomly and determine what the different male and females will be for each animal each round. This will show players the amount of male and females that will either be able to be taken and put into their zoo or be taken out of their zoo to give away. Players will then, one at a time, starting with the start player, place their cubes onto animals that they would like to either bring into their zoo or to take out of their zoo. Once each player has placed 2 cubes, they will then take the animals that they are deciding to bring into their zoo and place their coordinating meeples in the new arrival section of their board and place down the coordinating cards. Keeping in mind that before the animals can be placed in enclosures in their park, they have to meet the minimum happiness requirements on that animal's card. For example here, before this player can place the zebras, they must have at least 3. Once all players are finished, the market is cleared by taking off all the colored cubes, and we move on to the fall phase. The first thing in the fall phase is that each player will gain 3 enclosure tiles along with some additional for different things, but at the beginning of the game, each player does start with 6. A new donor card is then flipped. Basically, a donor card is another way that a player can get more enclosure tiles. And if a player decides that they don't have enough money moving into the building phase, they may choose to get a loan up to a maximum of $10, and every cube at the end of the game in the loan section on the main board is -1 popularity at the end of the game. Now moving into one of the most exciting parts of the round, and that is the building phase. All players may now build enclosures, looking at the animals that they have gotten and building enclosures based off of that animal's preferences. So whatever amount of open space they need, whatever amount of focal points or retreats that they need in their enclosures, as well as building any buildings that they would like in their park, or focal points in each animal's enclosure. Later in the game, players may also decide to add additional animals to existing enclosures, or even extend existing enclosures to make room for more animals in future rounds. As players use their enclosure tiles, they will go down on that respective track, as well as they use their money for buildings and focal points, they will go down on the money track as well. Focal points are $2, while buildings are $5, and on these 2 sheets, it gives you a ton of information about each building and how they are scored. Once players are finished building enclosures and buildings, as well as adding in any animals that they would like, they then have to place cubes on the 4 different happiness categories based off of where that animal is at that point. Each player's base popularity will then go up based off of the animals that they added to their park, and their buzz will go up based off of the most popular main species added to your zoo that round. Your base popularity is permanent, so it never moves, but buzz is reset every single round, and it is based off of where your base popularity is. And lastly, all players then put up their running cost based off of the animals added to their park. At this time, I should probably mention staff, which each player does start with 1 staff member, but can add 2 additional staff members by adding $3 per staff member to their running cost, and staff members are basically workers that can be placed in different actions throughout the round in each season and are just used for different things throughout the game. Now that is everything for fall. Let's move into winter, which is pretty much just a cleanup phase. The first thing that you do is animal keeping, which you are just putting up the experience tracker on each animal, representing one more year with that animal. The player that is highest on the education track will then go up once on the conservation track. All players must then pay taxes, which is represented by any money over 3 being forfeited. Each player's revenue is then calculated by adding up where their buzz marker is and any buildings that they have, then minusing any running costs that that player may have. That total is then added to the money track to spend on the next round. And then all you have left to do is reset the buzz markers, place back all of your staff members used, and move into the next round or year. Now, like I mentioned before, in the first round, spring is skipped, but let's take a look at what all other future rounds will start with. First up is that the first player marker will be passed to the next player, and an event card will be flipped, making different things happen each round. For example, here you have bad weather, which means every zoo loses $3. Next up is offspring, so you will be looking at each of your animals based off of the females and males that are in each enclosure, and rolling die based off of those things. So for example, here I have 2 pairs of birds, which means I will be rolling 2 die, and any successful die, I will be placing an offspring cube in that enclosure. Offspring cubes can be grown up at any time, and any offspring cube at the end of the game is worth -1 point. But I should also mention that having offspring does create buzz in your zoo and allows you to go up on the popularity track with your buzz marker, getting you more income each round. Moving into the end round, players then score for conservation projects as well as losing any points for any offspring cubes, and players may then spend all remaining money on additional enclosures, different focal points, or buildings. Players then compare their popularity score to their conservation score, and whichever one is lower is that player's final victory points. The player with the most is the winner of Zoo Tycoon the board game, and that is everything for today's overview. Like I mentioned, this is a little bit of a heavier board game, so I didn't go too much in depth with this overview, but hopefully you guys got a good understanding of how it played. But if you do have any questions, leave them down below, and let's get back to the video. So that is everything for the overview of Zoo Tycoon the board game. Oh my goodness, I'm just gonna say it now, Francis and I really enjoyed this game, and they actually did get the licensing from Microsoft to actually do Zoo Tycoon the board game, which is really exciting. And I also do want to mention that this is something that really makes me happy, and that is that this board game is carbon neutral. So they have tried to make it as carbon neutral as possible, which is amazing. And then the other thing that I wanted to discuss is that I know a lot of people are going to be asking this question. When I did post this on my Instagram, which is at Jenna Rose Beasley, by the way, if you want to go follow me over there. But a lot of people, when I posted about this, asked the same question, and that was, how does this compare to Ark Nova? And Francis and I did not play it at that point, but exciting news is that we finally got our copy of Ark Nova, and we actually played it last night. So I can kind of give you guys a little bit of a comparison between the two, and I'm really happy to announce that they are completely different games. They both have similar themes where you are, constructing your own zoo and placing in different enclosures and buildings. But I will say that the main difference between Ark Nova and Zoo Tycoon is that Zoo Tycoon, the board game, focuses not solely, but a lot more on the care of the animals, which I really love. I felt like in Ark Nova, it was a little bit more about you being the manager of the zoo, and you're placing down those cards with the animals, but the animals themselves do not matter whatsoever in Ark Nova. Once you play an animal and you've done their one-time ability, the only thing that you're paying attention to on that animal is their icons at the top. So whether that's the continent or the type of animal that they are, or the enclosure size, anything like that, you're not really paying attention to the animal themselves. A lot of the animals are very cute, but it doesn't really matter because you're not really paying attention to that. So The difference with Zoo Tycoon is that you are, instead of like the manager of the zoo in Ark Nova, you're more of the zookeeper in Zoo Tycoon, the board game, where you actually are paying attention to the animals in your park, their happiness, trying to create the best enclosure for them to be as happy as possible. And I really, really enjoy that. I think it's so cute that you're taking care of these animals and trying to make them as happy as possible. And the happier they are, the more points you get. And you actually like know the animals that are in your park. I found by the end of Ark Nova, I had a bunch of animals in my park, but I don't even remember what they were. But in Zoo Tycoon, the board game, after our initial play of it, I knew that I had an amazing little enclosure of raccoons, I had amazing little enclosure of zebras and bears and lions, and I just absolutely loved that part of it. So yes, I wanted to quickly mention that. Also, I feel like Ark Nova feels a little bit more mechanical in a way. You are focused a lot more on comboing things and different things like that. Ark Nova is a 3.51 on Board Game Geek, whereas Zoo Tycoon is a 4. So this is a little bit more heavy, complicated, I almost said, but it's really not complicated. Once you learn Zoo Tycoon, it's not too difficult. And you go through rounds pretty quickly once you get a hang of it. You go through all 4 of the seasons, and I really, really enjoy it. Also, the whole like babies having offspring is like the cutest thing ever. Even though they are just like cubes that you're taking out, like every time I pull a cube, I just get so happy. Like, oh, it's a girl, it's a boy. So yes, I quickly did want to mention that at the end of this because I know a lot of you are probably going to be asking that question, how it compares to Ark Nova. And yeah, they are both completely different games. I really, really enjoy both of them. It just depends on what you prefer, if you want, you know, to be a zoo manager or if you want to be a zookeeper. Also in Zoo Tycoon, you are still the manager as well because you're having to deal with, you know, your income and your buzz and all of that stuff and your buildings and all of those things. But there's more of a focus on the animals, which I really, really love. So anyways, that is going to be everything for the Kickstarter preview and overview of Zoo Tycoon, the board game. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Like I mentioned, I will have the link to the Kickstarter down below. If you think this is something that you would be into and if you would enjoy, definitely go check that out. And yeah, that's everything for today. I love you guys so, so much. Be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. Comment down below if you are interested in getting Zoo Tycoon, what you think of the game. Subscribe if you have yet to do so. We'd love to have you here in the Board Game Garden. We, I believe, are pretty close to 8,000, and my ultimate goal for 2022 is to get to 10,000 before the end of the year. So if you're not subscribed yet, please consider. And yeah, I love you guys so much. Remember, you are somebody's reason to smile, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, friends.